Our first speaker will be Roxanne Hussein. Her title is From Tahiti to My Plate for Leadership Development Level 1, Master Fundamental Evaluation and Feedback. Second speech. She will be telling us the story of how Breadfruit, a Jamaican breakfast staple, made its way from Tahiti to her plate. Let's welcome Roxanne Hussein. Roxanne.
Friends, remember Breadfruit? If you were not here when I shared this story the last time and you don't know this fruit, not to worry. Back in April, only Jim, Christian, and Donna knew what breadfruit was. And yet, this fruit is as prolific as that mango you were all chatting about, with hundreds of known varieties grown in 90 countries worldwide. When the Europeans discovered it in the late 1500s, they were both amazed and delighted by it. Who had ever seen such a thing? A starchy fruit that, when roasted in a fire, had both the aroma and texture of freshly baked bread. In Jamaica, breadfruit is comfort food, and adding it to any breakfast table turns it into a feast. A Jamaican would never serve a Sunday morning breakfast without it. The history of this popular Jamaican staple is one steeped in drama. Breadfruit originated in the Indo-Malay region, and it spread throughout the Pacific by voyaging islanders. The story of how breadfruit made its way from the Pacific to the Caribbean is the thing of which movies are made. No, literally, movies have been made. It was by providence, with assistance, that breadfruit came to Jamaica. Although breadfruit did not arrive on the island until 1793, the story begins 22 years earlier. Captain Cook had sailed to Tahiti on the HMS Endeavour, accompanied by Sir Joseph Banks. Seeing the breadfruit as a cheap way to feed the people who were enslaved in the Caribbean, Sir Joseph Banks proposed to King George III that he commission a special expedition to transport the breadfruit plants from Tahiti to the Caribbean. King George commissioned Lieutenant William Bligh to captain the ship to transport the trees. Thus, the stage was set for one of the most notorious mutinies in history, the Mutiny on the Bounty. On the journey to transport the trees to the Caribbean, First Mate Fletcher Christian led a mutiny against Captain Bligh and set him, along with 18 of his loyalists, adrift on the ocean, leaving them for dead. But why? What was the motivation for this? The way Hollywood tells it, it's because Captain Bligh was a tyrant. He was, but is that enough? Or that the mutineers just wanted to stay in Tahiti, which ultimately they did, and their descendants still live in that region today. Even so, is that really enough? What act could Captain Bligh have committed that is so egregious that it would bring Fletcher Christian to hold a bayonet to his head and force him off the ship? The documented truth is this: supplies were scarce and the ship was overcrowded, and Captain Bligh wanted to use the last of the men's drinking water to water the breadfruit saplings. That's right. He valued the life of fruit trees over the lives of men. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The mutineers tossed hundreds of breadfruit plants overboard. Not that it mattered, since they took the bounty back to Tahiti and ultimately burnt it. The movies tell of the courage and the sailing skills of the men left for dead, and the courtroom drama of Captain Bligh's trial for the loss of the bounty and the men for the mutiny. But what you don't see in the movies is that 2 years later, Captain Bligh returned to Tahiti to complete his mission, this time with 2 ships, the HMS Providence and the HMS Assistance. So you see, as I said earlier, it was by Providence with assistance that breadfruit was successfully introduced to the Caribbean. You may have thought that I meant the providence of God with the assistance of man. I guess you can take it both ways. Nonetheless, the mission was regarded as a failure. You'll understand, the people who were enslaved were unfamiliar with it and refused to eat it. Instead, they fed it to the pigs. It would be almost a century before breadfruit becomes the staple that it is today. One might say that again, it was by providence. In one season, the island was hit with 5 severe hurricanes, wiping out the crop, forcing the inhabitants to embrace breadfruit. Before it gets to the table, breadfruit needs to be cooked. In Jamaica, this is traditionally done by roasting over an open wood flame or by cooking on one of these coal pots. This is our Jamaican version of an outdoor kitchen. The process cooking time is 1 hour to 2 hours, depending on the size of the fruit. The one you see here will take about 1 hour. The breadfruit flesh becomes infused with the sweet, savory, smoky flavor of the char. And once the fruit is completely cooled, the charred skin is removed. The fruit is then cut into wedges and enjoyed hot with some salt and butter, or thinly sliced and fried. In other Caribbean islands, instead of roasting, they boil it in coconut milk. But take it from me, baked, roasted, boiled, or fried, there is never a wrong way to eat breadfruit. Come, let's get it to the table. Now I'm salivating. Who knew that a fruit could have such a tale, or that a history lesson could leave you hungry? Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Roxanne. That was a very delicious speech. Our second speech